All right, we've got a return guest on the Reset podcast today. It's the beautiful Kate Billing. Kate, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I welcome the invitation for a chat with you anytime, Luke.
It's always fun, isn't it? And we're going to talk about something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, and it's the midlife reset. That thing that happens somewhere in your late 40s and into your 50s, where you kind of think, oh wow, my life's changing, and how do I want to do that deliberately? And as someone that looks at you call yourself a humanist, and I love that. That looks at the human side of things, and I'd love to get your take on what a midlife reset looks like for you, and what it looks like for some of the people you work with.
Yeah, it's such an important conversation because there are, I think, a lot of stories and stereotypes, myths and legends about midlife and what happens there. And for the most part, I think the way we frame it in our minds and in society and in our workplaces, etc., is that it's a bad time. The classic midlife crisis stereotype, which tends to be associated with men, of the red sports car, the toupee,
Yeah,
maybe hair dye. I think we've got some examples of it all over the place. Jeff Bezos, anybody? You
just book
know,
out Venice for a wedding.
just look out Venus already. But yeah, let's leave them to their lives. But I think that the midlife reset concept, I think, is such an important one, that we see the time and space as an opportunity for taking stock, kind of reviewing, editing, rebuilding, deciding anew. It's a time of life so full of opportunity, but also so full of challenge. And I think what it'll be interesting for you and I to explore is how maybe it's the same for men and women, and how in some ways it's different, or maybe comes at different times. Because I think one of the big things that's driving the conversation, or at least has opened up the conversation for women, has been, over the last 3 or 4 years, the elevating and amplifying of the conversation around menopause, perimenopause, and menopause, which had been completely off the radar for 20 years, right? So women have a physiological, cognitive, identity-based shift that is being driven by changes inside their bodies, apart from any of the existential stuff that might happen for all of us when we cross the halfway line, wherever we
Yeah.
decide that might be.
It is a tough one, that one, because there's a whole biological thing. The idea of just walking down the street and bursting into flames, which is what my wife describes it when you get hot flushes.
Yeah.
That just sounds horrendous, and
Well, and
it
that's
must
just
be
the
a
half of it,
really
right?
difficult thing.
That's the half of it, right? Those are the stereotypical symptoms, and certainly the ones that can be extraordinarily discombobulating for people. I love that word, but like hot flushes, as an example, really are. Mine came with nausea and vertigo. So not
Right.
only do you feel like you're suddenly, like, you've got prickly heat all over your body, um, and you just like have to do anything you can to cool down, but I would feel like I was getting motion sickness and was going to throw up. So,
Right.
as you can imagine, that can be a little bit distracting. So,
Yeah, a little bit.
a little
A little
bit.
bit.
But yeah. So I think, so, I mean, gosh, there are so many directions we can go with this. But if we maybe start with, I think, some of the common stuff, maybe for men and women around this, which um, a lot of the time is tied to getting older and facing our own mortality, and this existential crisis that comes with, gosh, I'm halfway, or I'm over halfway, or maybe something happens in your own health or the health of a family member, or you lose a parent, or your children move out and you're suddenly like, oh shit, this is all, there's something that will be a bit of a catalytic moment, I think, for everybody when they get to midlife, where there is this, maybe there's less time ahead of me than there is behind. Who am I now? what does a good life look like for me now? What are good relationships with my children, my partner, my parents, my friends look like? What does work mean for me now? Maybe some of the financial pressures off, or maybe more of it's come on because your adult children need more financial support, or your parents do because they're living longer and they might not have saved enough money. I mean, in Australia, you have a much better superannuation environment than we do here in New Zealand. So,
Mhm.
it's really likely that our parents might run out of money. So there are a whole lot of things that you haven't really thought about that like suddenly snap into focus, I think, that are all about who am I? What am I doing? Who am I doing it with? Why? And how long might this go on with? And what do I want to do with the time? So if you ever wanted some component parts of something that comprised a reset, I reckon those are some of the
Yeah, they're
questions that
pretty good
might
ones,
do
aren't
it.
they? What has there been a catalyst for you that sort of has punctuated this bit? That sort of, other than maybe the biological one, has there been something that's actually got you thinking, "Wow, I need to have a look"? Because I know you've altered the way you do all of your work. That it used to be very corporate structured. Now it's a bit more sort of individuals and humans. So
Yeah, and look, that's all evolving, always, because I'm a creature of evolution and exploration. I just can't help myself. I like. It's not a bright shiny thing syndrome, but it's like this. I wonder what if. What's over that? What's around that corner or over that
gee,
hill?
it's not hard to tip that into bright shiny thing syndrome, though, is it?
I know,
But
so one has to be careful. But in terms of what my experience has been, I think absolutely the physiological stuff of perimenopause snuck up on me and then kicked my ass.
right,
Snuck up on me kind of 45 to 51 ish, and then 51 to 56. Like I am officially, whoops, keep hitting my mic. I'm officially postmenopause now, day 381. For anyone who cares, women, you will know. Men, you'll be like, "What the fuck is she talking about?"
wow. We have
Wow,
a day. Do we have an anniversary
here's a
for that or
day.
something? It's
Well, yeah, I'm going to have a party. I've decided because it certainly didn't feel like that. There's no doubt that's a huge catalyzer for women, but not all women have it experience it the same way. But with that comes, I mean, for a start, like I used to have dark hair,
Mhm.
and when I was in my 20s, I developed alopecia, which is a kind of stress-related autoimmune disorder, and I lost most of my big patches of my
Wow.
hair, but the only hair that didn't fall out were a few grey ones that I had at the back here. So the beginnings of silver hair, even in my 20s, but you couldn't really see it until I kind of got to my late 40s, I think. And as you commented when we came on this call, oh, your hair looks different, because anyone who knows me will know it's usually kind of like up in this quiff thing.
Yeah.
And when it's up, well, which way am I doing it today? Uh, you get, when you've got like white, silver hair, like this, I refuse to call it grey. When you have silver hair, you get a high watermark. Like this is a tide line as your
Right.
hair grows out. And so it's kind of, like this first majorly visible sign of aging. And for it, what it, that and coming up to my 50th birthday, passing the halfway mark because I'm
Mhm.
into a 100-year life. I think what I what I was confronted by was my own internalized ageism. So my own
So
fears
that
and
internalized
stories.
ageism, is that something you're putting on yourself and saying this is how aging's
Mm.
affecting me? You're
Yeah, it's
biasing it.
how. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of different flavors. Like there are lots of different flavors of ageism, right? In terms of how it shows up in the world, but it's about basically the stories we tell ourselves, stereotypes, identities, limiting narratives that are diminishing and drive behavior that's undesirable against anybody, including ourselves, based on how old we are. So ageism can affect young people when older
Hmm.
people say, well, you don't know and you're too young and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And at 100, but the way it shows up most profoundly in our society, in our workplaces, and in our own minds is as we get older, right? And so this internalized ageism, I had to, I think I wrestled with it without knowing what it was for a couple of years, really. It would show until I recognized that it was showing up in my journaling and I was getting really bored with it. And,
Right.
and that there was, I'm like, what the hell is going on here? It's just like whiny, poor me bullshit. What's happening? And I kind of sort of came up with this stereotype called, the middle-aged woman. She's frumpy and invisible, and she wears sensible shoes, and nobody pays any attention to her, and she's got nothing to say, and she's
We can't
sad,
just
and
gloss over that one because that one is a fairly,
no,
it's something that comes up a lot, doesn't it?
yeah,
That whole idea of as a woman, and I think this isn't completely universal, but a lot of your self worth from when you're a little kid is tied to beauty. Yeah, little boys are told they're
100%,
big and strong, and girls are told they're beautiful. Ever since they've,
yeah,
I've got my nieces have got kids now, and we tell the little girls they're beautiful, and we tell the boys they're big and strong. And then you get into your 50s, and your hair's grey, and maybe you have a few pounds on you because hormones do some weird things with that, and women can look in the mirror and sort of say, okay, I'm not as beautiful as I once was. The people who love them still think they're beautiful, but they can look in the
yeah,
mirror and see grey hair and wrinkles. But a lot of men are still big and strong. A lot of men are
yeah,
still.
100%.
And so that
And
sort of ingrained bias that we've had since we were 5 and 6 years old, to men when we're not being diminished too much, but to women it certainly is. And I reckon that's got to be a harder thing to put up with. And it probably don't need to put up with it either, because obviously we've got to change the way we get our self-worth. And if we're doing it only through beauty, we're going to hang on to some shit that's fairly unattainable.
yeah, I mean, and it is so it is an enculturated thing. There's a level of indoctrination about it, but society and culture and the media and our workplaces and our friendships and everything tend and our relationships often play back to us that's how we're valued. That's where we're visible and valued. And that, and I think you and I had a chat about this not so long ago where I was saying, as men get older, it's even the language that we use, out in, I say, big into the how do we live long and well, and lead with impact. That's a big part of my thing. For men, and it's a lot of it's the conversation is about longevity and legacy,
It's a
and how you
euphemism, isn't it? That longevity is a way to sort of talk about vanity without being vain, I think, to men. That we can sort of say, yeah,
partly,
we're going to do all of these protocols. We're going to do, ice baths, and we're going to train gyms, and we're going to take testosterone, and we're going to do all of these things in the name of longevity. And I think it's just a thinly desired, disguised veil of vanity that we just want to
oh,
stay.
I think it's deeper than that. I think it's everyone's afraid of death. Everyone's afraid of dying,
Mm.
and that's the number one fear. It's something that it's such an opportunity again in terms of this midlife reset is to change your relationship with the idea of death and dying and what a good life looks like. Because I think the language for men is longevity and legacy. How do you stay strong and healthy and continue to make an impact in the world for as long as you can and all of this good shit, right? And then
Yeah.
for women, it's anti-aging. Don't grow
Yeah.
older. Don't grow visibly older
There's a
because
real
then you
positive
are,
and negative there, isn't there? One
we're
is
talking
biased
about
to
the
something
same,
that's probably pretty good, but the other ones just seem so negative.
yeah. And so gendered ageism, so the internalized ageism thing was something I found quite confronting, that I thought I had a really positive attitude to aging and I want to live 100-year life and I want to continue to have impact. And then this thing came and sucker punched me out of the deep recesses of my mind. I didn't even know it was there. It was completely transparent to me that I had a mental model of what getting older as a woman in midlife, this is not even old age, but in midlife meant. And the work that I did myself and the conversations I've had since that time, because this was like 2021, so over the last 4 years, with women about this, and they all go, holy shit, yes. There's this almost this relief of going, fuck, I've got that too. Oh my God, no wonder I'm beating myself up. No wonder I'm. And so the power of then taking ownership of that mental model and saying, we don't need to be defined by a story that's been written for us in our minds by other people and is perpetuated in society by media, by recruiters, by employers about whether they'll invest in you, by social media, whatever. We can decide to redefine ourselves and what midlife means for us and what being a woman in this time of life means for us, because never before, as you can tell, I get quite passionate about this. Never
Get into it,
before
Kate.
have, never before have so many women in this age and stage of life been as present in the workforce, carried as much responsibility in our homes. The majority of women I work with are the primary breadwinners for their families. They make more than their partners. They still carry the majority of emotional labour. They're trying to look young and hold on to looking vital and stuff because they want to have careers. And unfortunately, yes, the minute you start looking like you're getting older, there is unconscious bias around age, and particularly targeted at women in our workplaces. And, so there's all of this unbearable bloody load that's on women at this time in life from all directions, including from inside themselves.
So how do we
And
catch that and change it? How do we catch that story I'm telling ourselves that isn't
well,
helping and change the narrative?
Well, you have to do the work. And at the moment, the other thing is like, oh, fuck, this is another thing I've got to do.
Add it to
For
the
women,
list.
it's like, oh God, I'm already carrying all of this stuff. And now I've got to work on myself. Great. Don't have the time and space. Kids, partner, job, parents, all of it. There is no time for me. Women put themselves last, right? So, what I believe we need is we need targeted development and support that isn't just life coaching, menopause education, and the odd kind of weekend yoga retreat where we do it. We
Yeah.
need like fundamental, proper leadership development that helps men, because men are going through their own version of this, not at exactly the same time in the same way. It is a gendered, midlife is a gendered experience. But we need proper support so that people can build, because this is like one of the biggest adaptive challenge periods that we have in our lives on all fronts, in our relationships, in our bodies, in our identities, in our workplaces, and in the world, given AI, etc. Like there are no shortage of adaptive challenges. So I'm a firm believer that this time of life provides an opportunity to build the personal practices and the capacity and capability and connections and community, etc., that help us navigate it better personally, together as a cohort of Gen Xers, and that will help us show up more powerfully and profoundly in our leadership, because never have so many, particularly women of this age and stage, been in paid employment and in leadership roles, like never.
Mm.
And we're living
Yeah.
longer, we're going to work longer. Gen X are going to have to stay in the workplace because most of us are going to want to or have to work longer. But no one's talking about Gen X because everyone's raving about the boomers and the millennials and Gen Zs. And so we're
Well, the
quietly getting on with it, right?
Gen X is in a weird situation, but particularly when it comes to leadership in business, because one of the
Yeah.
things that happened is we had leaders when we were younger that
Mm,
would do what I say because I told you to say it, and that's what you got to do. That's the way
yeah.
leadership worked. So they were our mentors when we were entering the workforce. And then all of a sudden we got to those roles where we have leadership roles, and it's almost reversed, that we have to do the things that are looking after the millennials and the Gen Zs, because if we don't, they'll fall apart, and we need them. So we can't lead the way the people taught us to lead. We have to lead in a different way. And it's sort of, it almost like we didn't catch a break. We got told what to do when we were the followers, and now we're the leaders, we're getting told what to do as well. Which it sounds like poor me, and it's not. But it's a bit like parenting, that's changed a little bit from what it was back in the 70s and 80s to what it is now. And somewhere in the middle, there's probably a happy medium.
Yeah. And look, I think Gen X are the most adaptable generation. We've come through analog into digital. We're not digital natives. And I believe that's a good thing because
Okay.
we know how to operate in both worlds. We know what change in those environments looks like. We're digitally curious people.
Hmm.
We're capable.
We're not
None of the
digitally
myths.
inept like our parents were. We can
Well,
actually
who
do a lot of
didn't?
this
Well,
stuff.
even even the boomers aren't, particularly the late boomers. The second half of the boomers who are still in the workforce in
Yeah.
massive numbers are not. I think a lot of, again, this is negative stereotypes about aging. And
Yeah.
it's one of the most common ones is that they don't understand tech. It's like my dad's 86 and my mum's 78, and they're on their tech all the time. They occasionally
Right.
ask for a bit of tech support if something happens, and my husband will go deal with that. But the silent generation, of which my dad is one, he was born in 1939, so he calls himself a war boy. I know Gen X, we talk about being the latchkey kids and all the rest of it. And we're different in many ways from the generation before us and boomers, but not so different from the silent generation, particularly what my dad calls the war boys.
Hmm.
He calls himself that. They were born at the beginning of the war. And you imagine what the environment was like growing up, having your formative years when the biggest world war in history is going on. Men have largely disappeared.
Hmm.
You are left to your own devices because women are working out of the
Yep.
home in massive numbers. So it was kind of like they were Gen X before Gen X was.
Yeah.
And
Good
they
point.
would, and I think there's a whole lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about that. And the silent generation, people are getting chucked in with boomers, and boomers are being misdescribed. And I firmly believe midlife goes from like 45 to 75. So that's
Yeah.
the other thing
That's about
about
right.
midlife. It's not like this tiny period of time. Coming back to the longevity piece, like we are living longer
Hmm.
and we are living better. At least our generation are, for sure, as are the boomers, particularly the late boomers, right? And so we are getting an extra 10 to 20 years of midlife. And midlife can be a really incredible time, but we have all these shitty stories about it, and it feels pretty crap at the beginning. But if you say it's going from 45 to 75, and by the time we get to 75, who knows, maybe we'll have pushed it out further. We are not old and doddery now, and we certainly won't be by 65. I don't know about you. That's only 9 years away for me.
Yeah. So, well,
And I'm like,
my mum's 83, and she's moved into not an aged care, like an over 50s place, and she's on committees for this and committees for that, and she's running this, and we're doing this social thing, and I've never seen her more excited about life. And she's 84 years old. She's rocking. She's absolutely
well,
killing it.
and at that age, that is about the average age for moving into a retirement living situation.
Hmm.
In fact, most of and I think, again, this is part of the mental model that we've got. Our generation grew up, those of us who are in midlife now, grew up with aged care being one thing, and that was a rest home.
Yeah.
And that's where your grandparent went, maybe. And it was where there was a brilliant British comedy series called One Foot in the Grave. And
Hmm.
that
The
basically,
cranky old bugger, wasn't he?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that people basically went there to die.
Yeah.
Now, that's not the aged care, because of our generation and the boomers, and your mum, who is a silent, she's a silent generation, tail end of the
Hmm.
silent generation at
Yep.
84. They're doing aging differently, and so of course we're going
Well,
to
some of
even
them are. She talks about some of the people that are in this place that are actually very, very. They're old, and they've lost that curiosity. They've lost that spirit. They've lost that spark that Mum still has. And she says, "Oh, some of them are so old, and the old ones are probably 5 and 6 years younger than her," which I think is quite funny. But that's just the
right.
ABCs of Mum. But then I look at, and there's some. We talk a lot about the difference in the genders here, and there's a couple of things that men can tend to be hermits. A lot of men, particularly the introverted men, they just can't be bothered anymore and they turn into hermits. I know my dad did that. He passed away a couple of years ago, and he was same as yours, born in 1939. And he just turned into a hermit, and his knees packed in. He stopped playing golf, so he stopped socializing, and he died really quickly. He died within a couple of years of that, and he wanted to too. I remember him saying towards the end that he got a pacemaker, and his biggest regret was he got the pacemaker because it kept him going longer than he really wanted to. He'd given up.
And at that age, that hurts my heart that somebody would find themselves in that place, right? There's some brilliant work by Becca Levy, who is a professor of both epidemiology and psychology at Yale University. And she and her team have been researching this for over 30 years now, looking at the impact of negative mindsets, internal narratives, etc., about aging and their impact on both quality of life and life expectancy. And having negative mindsets, stereotypes, stories about what aging means for you or for anybody costs on average. They've looked at the data, and people who have those negative stereotype stories, wish their life away, I'm frail, I can't do these things, etc., live 7.5 years less.
That is a lot, isn't it? 7.5 years.
7.5 years. Now, once this is part of why I think the opportunity in midlife, further to the stereotype work, like understanding what are the mental models that you've got running that might be inadvertently impacting your potential, your joy, your health, your lifespan, your ability to make impact, like what's going on. It's an opportunity to check the wiring. And these ones about what aging means for us in our health and well-being are critical. And I think midlife, while we're in this stirred up place, provides an opportunity to build the capacity and capability to do that work so that we can rewrite, for example, those negative and limiting narratives about aging and well-being as we age to actually give us perhaps another 7 years of life, which at this point, when the end is looking closer than the beginning, I'm feeling quite good about getting an extra 7.
An extra 7 years wouldn't hurt, huh?
Yeah, because the story we have, one of the stories that most people have, is that once we get to the middle, the best of life is behind us. You've reached your peak, and it's all downhill from here.
Well,
when
that's
the data doesn't show that.
Well, some of the data does, but it depends on whether you change. I love Arthur Brooks's work on some of this, and he has a great article that anyone can look up, and it says your professional decline is coming sooner than you think. And he's a happiness professor at Harvard.
I'm across his work.
All of it. But that idea of how do we our fluid intelligence, our ability to remember things really quickly and be able to, that cognitive brain power is going to get down, but our wisdom goes up. And so how do we sort of use our wisdom more than our raw horsepower of smarts? And his way of talking about that, I thought, was really good.
So there's a book. I'm going to move away from the screen for just a moment because I'm going to see if I've got it behind me. So hang on.
Go for life. But that article, if anyone wants to read it, is great. What have we got?
This book should be on everyone's reading list. And so I first, there was an article in The Economist.
Get you to hold that up again for us, Kate, and I'm going to refer anyone just listening on audio. It's called The Happiness Curve, Why Life Gets Better in Midlife. And it's by
Jonathan Rauch. Jonathan Rauch, R-A-U-C-H. So I first read an article about this in The Economist in 2010, and it was called The U-Bend of Happiness. And that combined with moving away from the mic again. Reading this book a few years later, The 100-Year Life, which is written by two professors from the London School of Business, Linda Grattan and Andrew Scott. Both of those books did a lot of myth busting for me about what life can and should look like for us. And the thing about the happiness curve, the article I read, The U Bend of Life, before the book came out, was about the myth we've been told that life is better in the middle and then gets harder, when actually all of the data says that it works the other way.
Hmm.
It gets harder in the middle. We are less well, less happy, less fulfilled, more stressed, all of these things in the middle, and then it gets better again. And there are a whole lot of reasons why I encourage people to read the book. Part of it is expectation. We expect life to be better in the middle because that's what the myths and legends say. And then we get here and go, fuck, this is really hard. And
Hmm.
so the gap between what we expect and what we experience is huge. And therefore our experience of it is that it is even more challenging maybe than it is. I mean, this is one of the, while we're on the happiness tip, Finland have been like the happiest country in the world for like 7 years or something now. And part of it is because their definition of happiness is different from the rest of the world.
Well,
You
it's the
know,
same in a lot of Asian countries. Their definition of happiness is calm and contented, and
yeah.
it's
But
that's different
I
to the
think
way
we've
we
been
work in a
sold,
lot of our individual cultures.
yeah, we've been sold a bill of goods. So the data says, although, and even people of your mum's, my dad's, my mum's age, even though they are physically, as my dad calls it, in a managed decline, you know, things start breaking down, and actually they start in midlife, which is part of what can be a bit challenging. Even though he is not the strapping lad he was in the
Hmm.
past, he's the happiest he's ever been, the most fulfilled
Nice.
he's ever been. And so our definition of happiness changes. We live different lives, etc. So I think, and
How are his social connections?
huge.
They're
So
huge. Yeah.
yeah, they go to the pools every morning and go swimming, and they have a social group up there which they call their pool pals,
Right.
which is an intergenerational group that also cuts across socio-economic
Yep.
and
No one's
ethnic
richer than anyone else when you're
groups.
in your togs in the water in the cold in winter, are you? So.
Absolutely, right? It's 6 o'clock in the morning, and everyone's there, right? They're all showing up and doing something hard, and they have and they get that 5 mornings a week.
Hmm.
You know, they
We.
live independently in a two-story house.
I think your dad might, and he's not on his own. There's plenty like him
No,
as
no,
well. But
yeah,
one of the stats Arthur Brooks pulled out, which I loved, was that 2/3 of men describe their wife as their best friend,
mm,
but only 1/3 of women describe their husband as their best friend, which
yes,
means that women have more best friends. They have more people around them, better social networks and stuff, and as
yes,
opposed to the hermits that get old and don't do that. And
yes,
I actually think that might be one of the reasons why men are dying younger. If you look at the Harvard study, by Robert Waldinger and all of those guys that have been going since the 40s or the 30s, that the biggest thing to predict how well you're going to do in old age is your connection. And
yeah,
one of the things that I've got a real concern about this is that a professor by the name of Bill von Hippel, who's a friend of mine in Queensland, and he wrote a book called The Social Paradox, and he talks about how there's an imbalance between autonomy and connection. That that the more autonomy we have, often the less connection we have. And the hassle is that the way society's going, we're doubling down on autonomy and wondering why our connection's going down the toilet. Now, I get to do whatever I want, but I don't actually get to do it with anyone else. And it makes me worry about how some of the generations going forward are going to handle midlife if they don't actually fix their ability to connect
well, it's not even how they're going to handle midlife, it's how they're handling life at
in
all
general.
based on.
Yeah.
So, again, I'll just come back, I'll address your gendered thing about the relationships, but I just want to come back to this. So, the happiness curve, some of the most recent data indicates that now it's not like it's really great in our teenage years and 20s, and then it gets harder in the middle, and then we're the
Yeah.
happiest we've ever been later.
Well,
The
teenagers has dropped
beginning
like a
of,
stone, hasn't it?
yeah, so it's not actually you, it's looking more like a kind of a ski slope, a hockey
Yep.
stick, because our generation and the boomers and the silent generation are still, we had those very challenging times, but very good times growing up. So it's not just when they hit midlife. And again, it's a complex set of systemic and internalized drivers that are meaning younger people and even people of our age are becoming more insular, less connected, etc. So there's some, environmental stuff generally. There's some life stuff. COVID, we all went through it, and that put a hammer on it. But if I come back to your question about men and relationships, even the Blue Zone research, no matter how questionable some of the findings that may have been drawn from that,
I'm just going to eat olive oil and walk up hills and I'll be okay. And that's kind of. Yeah. But all of the Blue Zone stuff, a lot of that came back to connection as well, and how the older people were revered in those Blue Zones and stuff like that. So there was an element of connection in the Blue Zone stuff too.
And that's what I wanted to highlight, was saying, and often, in society, smaller group environment, living environment, villages, life like that, it's easier because people are more connected, rather than in large urban environments where the more densely you are living with each other, the more privacy people want to create. The lack of connection.
Which is a weird paradox, isn't it?
More of us are living in cities than before. Mm-hmm. So cities is part of it. We're going to have 80% of the world's population living in high-density environments in the next 25 to 30 years. So what's that going to do? What's happening with technology, etc.? Women are more wired for connection. We have this tend and befriend kind of reflex that's part of the fight, flight, or play dead thing. Mm-hmm. So we seek out others when we are stressed, when we are under threat. And we will see that in each other and seek to support. Now, the flip side of that is drama and everything, which is not ideal, but there is a good side to it, right? So women are more wired for that. Neurobiologically, we are wired for that. Estrogen is all about this kind of people-pleasing / connection, care for others. Which is one of the reasons after perimenopause and menopause we give less of a shit about what people think, because our brains have literally rewired to remove a bunch of those connections. There's been a massive editing process go on in the brain through perimenopause. For men, when we think about Robin Dunbar's work, a famous social anthropologist who looked at the way human groups work in terms of
5 close friends, 15 middle-sized friends, and 150 in your tribe, that sort of Robin Dunbar stuff?
150 is he defined as the maximum size for a human group to have stable social connection. So that
starts splintering after that.
Yeah, you could recognize people, something about them. There is a level of relationship. You're not just connected to them in a week. Weak links through social media can be incredibly powerful, but that's a different world. Even that research has said it's kind of 275 to 300 meaningful connections even through social media. So what I call the type 5, which is that 5 close relationships. If you have a partner, a romantic partner, that person takes up 2 of those 5 spots. Even for women. And when I talk with women about this, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. I have my partner, whoever that may be, and then I have 2 or 3 other people who I'm really invested in, and they are really invested in me, and we prioritize each other. And those are the people that they don't just know where the bodies are buried, they probably helped put them there. Is the way we kind of talk about it.
I love the idea of you wake up with a dead body in the boot of your car. Who do you call? And I'm sure you call.
Yeah, who knows where the bag is that you need taken out of the house if you die before your parents come over. Yeah, that's got all the stuff you don't want them to see.
But so you want that friend that's going to say, "I'll bring my shovel."
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to sort this out.
Yeah, we ride at dawn. But what happens for men? And increasingly it's happening for women as well. In the past, it's been they get caught up in the work thing, right? So they're working all hours.
Yep.
Because men have this linear career, they can get that I've got to be there for that, and stuff at home gets kind of taken care of, even if their wife is in a similarly or more significant job. It's easy for people to kind of just get consumed by work and not make time for relationships, or when the time is available, they need to put it into their families, which is the right thing to do. And so when there is less of an internal and innate drive to, even when those, because we all have masses of friends in our 20s, right? We're all single and we're going out, and then people get into relationships, but you're still young with no kids and responsibilities. So there's just a whole lot more spending time together. And then we get mortgages, get married, get kids. People move out, maybe to the suburbs or away. And then careers get bigger and kids need more time and no one has weekends anymore. So you've got to be really conscious and deliberate about identifying and nurturing the relationships that matter. And that doesn't have to mean spending acres of time together. It can mean making sure that you have a good phone call, sending each other a little text, making a dinner plan, even if it's just a couple of times a year where you actually get together and you have deep conversation, letting each other know that you give a shit about each other and that you are seen and heard. So I think we also have this story about what it takes to cultivate a relationship and what a good friendship looks like based on how we did things in our 20s versus it can be quite, we have an opportunity in midlife to rescope our relationship with ourselves, with our partner, with our kids, our parents, and our friends. And I think that's a real opportunity for men to say, who are the people who matter most? And if there are 3 people aside from my partner, because that's the other thing, it doesn't have to be a massive group, that I'm going to actively invest in because I love these guys. And they are the people, like if something's going bad at work or if something happens with my partner and I need to have someone to talk to or just rant and rave about it, I want to know that I can call them, they will take my call and they will listen without judgment.
Yes. I love the idea of who's your go-to. And for me, your go-to is someone who has your best interest at heart. There's sort of 3 things to it. They have your best interest at heart. They'll shut up and listen and not let their advice monster jump in too quickly, which is a really hard thing for a lot of people. And when they do give advice, they help you work out what you want to do rather than tell. So they help you find the solutions. And having that person is really, really vital. Going back to what you were saying about having those people, one of my best friends a few years ago got divorced, and it wasn't what he wanted to do. And his first thing he did was, he lived about an hour away. He came down to where all of his friends lived. He booked an apartment and he said, I just need my boys. And we all came running. All of us were like, okay, that's shit. And it was a shit time for him and it took a while to get through it and stuff, but he did it deliberately knowing that he had to have his boys with him. And it was such a great thing to actually be one of those boys, to be one of those people that had his best interests at heart, that listened to him and helped him work out the solutions rather than tell him what to do. And I think if we could all be a little bit more open to listening and being able to communicate in a way that actually helps the other person find the solutions rather than tell them, I think we'd actually be a lot better off.
Yeah. I also want to add to that, it's great to we have our friendships of long standing is the way I refer to them now, rather than our old friends. It has new meaning as you get more runs on the board. That it's important for us to keep building our friendship muscle, like making new friendships and new relationships. Because further to your mum moving into, a retirement village, so into a community environment, if you haven't built those muscles and you don't know what your people look and sound like, and you're not curious and able to, because making new friends is a vulnerable act. Right? It's like going, do you like me? Will you want to hang out with me? That kind of thing.
I had a year off and went and lived in Ireland last year. So we had a gap year and went and lived in Ireland and went, okay, I have no friends. I've just moved to the other side of the world. And there was a weird freedom about saying, I'm not a loser. I have lots of friends. They're just on the other side of the planet. And that actually freed you up to be a bit more vulnerable and ask people. So, and within 2 weeks, I was in a book club. I had 3 or 4 different people I played golf with. I had mates who I could just ring up and say, let's go to the pub. All within like a month. But there was something that was easier because I didn't have that sort of cloud of being a loser that doesn't have friends because I was from the other side of the world. And I think
Yeah.
to be able to put that aside and be a little bit vulnerable, to be able to connect with new friends. I have a friend of mine, Phil, who I haven't caught up with for a little while, but I met him on a plane. He had his Kindle open and I had mine and said, oh, let's check what books were. And we had a lot of books that overlap. And him and I will catch up and, someone I met on a plane. And he's a really good dude. I love having lunch and going for a walk and stuff with Phil. He's a great fella. But I told some of my friends about this, and they're like, "Oh, fuck! I never talk to anyone who I'm on a plane with." And would be surprised. Nicholas Epley from University of Chicago did some great work on would you enjoy it more if you talk to the person next to you on a train or not? And they found that they did. So flexing that muscle that you talk about of how to actually make new friends is a really cool muscle worth flexing.
Yeah. And, it's easy to say in midlife that we don't have time and all the rest of it. Cool. Just nurture the key relationships you have to keep the capacity there. And then as you have opportunity, like you say, on a plane or something, is just strike up a conversation with people.
It's not that hard.
No, I want to come back to something you mentioned before, actually, just in
Shoot.
case listeners are interested, because I think this career decline thing is an interesting one, and I don't entirely agree with Arthur Brooks. This is one of those times I like lots of really smart people say really good things, and then I go, really? So I'm wondering. So I wonder a couple of things about the.
He put a caveat. I'm going to interrupt.
Oh
For a
no,
second.
no,
He
I
put
know,
a
I
caveat
know.
on it that if you don't jump from your fluid intelligence curve to your crystallized intelligence curve, then it will decline. But if you do jump, it doesn't necessarily have to.
So also, I think overlaid with that is there is very real gendered ageism in the workplace, which can impact career progression. And when I say progression, that doesn't always mean up, right? This is about, we have to get into this idea of now we've got the opportunity for non-linear careers. So what does career progress even look like? What do we mean by professional decline? Do we mean we get off a linear upward, always up career plane? Yeah, probably, because there's only so much room at the top. But does that mean that we get to have new adventures, create new value in the world, participate in our organizations in different ways, in different roles, in different flexible working is something that's important to everybody, and no more so than as we get older and have different responsibilities, want more space, want more time with our parents. When we're younger, we want more time with our kids. As we get older, we want more time with our parents. Elder care, there are now more people in the UK. There was some research released a couple of weeks ago. There are now more people in employment with elder care responsibilities than childcare responsibilities.
Wow.
And
Aging
women,
populations.
yeah, and Gen X women have both. So this is this midlife thing. We have kids we're responsible for, and we also increasingly have our parents needing us a bit more, right? So is that going to impact how our career might progress? 100%. Will our ability to do the work we've done in the past change? Maybe. I think there's the conversation about fluid and crystalline intelligence. Fluid intelligence starts to diminish in your early 30s. So, like, by the time you're kind of over 30, your testosterone is on the way down, and so it's the way your brain is wired, right? So, again, it's easy to have a story of decline, but it's like if we
I look at something as simple as remembering lyrics to songs. Pull out a lyric from a song from the 70s and 80s and I'll know every word. I can have a song that I've heard 100 times in the last 12 months and I can't remember the words anywhere near as well. I can probably sing along a little bit, but I can't remember the words like you do.
But I'd also say give yourself credit for the fact that you've been remembering those lyrics for like 40 years more. So give your brain a break. Don't misinterpret that data as my memory's going. It just hasn't been rerunning it as often. So there's also been some new research about what happens in women's brains about the extra X chromosome when we're in our early to mid 60s is what has previously been thought of as junk DNA. I love that phrase. It just means it's the 95% of it that they don't know what it does yet.
Yeah.
It doesn't make proteins, so it must be junk. Nature doesn't do anything by mistake. And that in our early to mid 60s, their second X chromosome switches on and does a whole lot of incredible stuff in the brain that enhances cognitive function and memory and processing power, etc. So, ladies,
Okay.
it ain't over. But this crystalline intelligence, I think it's important to emphasize the good stuff about that. And that is that we become better at like seeing patterns, operating in complexity. And if you think about the way the world is now, the ability to see patterns, sense make, and meaning make, to understand what's happening in complex systems, to have the courage based on experience. So some of the wisdom piece, which is wisdom's a combination of lived experience and intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
We can look back and see patterns. We've lived through stuff long enough that we understand what the cycles are, and it's not our first rodeo. You know, we came out of university in the late 80s, early 90s into the worst recession in however many years.
The pretty
very
ordinary
much
job
like,
market back then, wasn't it?
yeah, very much like what's happening now. And so we've been through this a number of times. So we know we're not panicking. We know what's going on. We're able to hold our heads. So we have the history. Then with new data, we're better at making sense of what's going on, seeing patterns, inferring conclusions. We are also better as part of crystallized intelligence at forming and holding teams together, particularly to pass on learning and to help lead people through change. So when you think about, even though those are just a few aspects of crystallized
Great things to have in a
intelligence,
leader, though, aren't they? They're a really important thing to have in a leader.
particularly in times of increasing complexity and change, and where there is not that wisdom experience or cognitive capability in younger leaders. So this is where having deliberately intergenerational teams and workplaces is going to be really important. And you mentioned before about, the different things that are being asked of leaders now. Different things are being asked of everybody. How we participate at any age in any role in an organization is shifting. And I firmly believe that our generation in particular, and the boomers who are still in the workplace have been through this too, right? We're digitally adaptive. We've got our brains are now, through crystallized intelligence, the kind of brains that are bringing leadership capability, smarts, and experience that organizations and the world needs. If we can operate in deliberately intergenerational teams and help people who haven't lived through this before find their way and contribute their best work, like great ideas and energy, etc., then we're onto a winner. It's when there is this misplaced judgment of ourselves and of others that we're past it, and that the young people are the great white hope, that we are going to hit problems, because they're not. We need all of us. They need us. We need them. And we have to, think about how we can stay. Part of this midlife reset is really challenging ourselves about who we are and how we want to show up in the world, and continue to play in a profound and powerful way in our own lives and in our leadership in the world, because there is so much good stuff for us to do. And we've got, if you're in your mid 40s or your early 50s or whatever, you've got like 25 years more in the workforce. And don't be afraid of that. If you are, then you've got some work to do about the work you're doing and where you're doing it.
Well, that's part of it. I love this idea of how I call it the time purpose paradox. That when we're young, we have a lot of time left in our life, but we have a lot of purpose. We're working, we're paying off mortgages, we're sending kids to school, we're doing pickups and all of that sort of stuff. So lots and lots of time left in our life, but not much time in the moment, and we've got heaps of purpose. Then when we get into midlife, we can get to that point where we perhaps don't have a lot of that purpose. We can perhaps, come back in our work a little bit, and we're not having to work quite so hard. And so then we've got a little bit more time. We don't have as much time left in our life, but we've got as much time in the moment. And I actually think through that sort of 45 to 75, we need to find a balance between time and purpose. And I think a lot of people will go, I'm just going to get to retirement. and their time then goes through the roof and their purpose drops off a cliff and they end up miserable as well. So how do we, I think our goal should be to spend those years with enough purpose that keeps us interested and keeps us relative, keeps us so we're contributing, but then with enough time to actually do the things that bring us joy and pleasure and fun and connection and all of those things that actually make life worth living. And so I think that's where your happiness curve, the people that do that, I think will do it really well. The people that I just want to get to retirement, and then their happiness can fall off a cliff because they've lost all their purpose.
I just would ask the question, why on earth would you want to retire? What from? Because that isn't a way.
If you're shoveling shit for a living, that makes sense.
But that's what I mean. Is like we've got to. There are some people. No, I think this is something that everybody should investigate. Is like, okay, what does retirement look like and mean? Because the people who are shoveling shit are just waiting for it to be over. They're not actually thinking. And I speak from experience in terms of people I know who have done this. They don't shovel shit, but they've been in physically demanding jobs, which mean that by the time they get to 65, they're like, they just can't do it anymore, or they don't want to because they don't have the energy, etc. And they've also been of a generation where retirement is a life goal, because when you retire, then suddenly you've got all this time and you don't do all of the things. Now, all the data is retirement's bad for your health. The research that was done in the US a couple of
the purpose is bad for your health, isn't it?
Well, in America, if you get national security, right, so they know when you stop signing on for national security for your super, equivalent of super, the only reason you would not do that is that you are no longer alive to do it, unless, of course, further to Doge or one of these fake profiles of your family are doing it longer than you, but let's leave that aside. And it is under 2 years was the average age post-retirement that people collected Social Security, meaning, and so there are a whole lot of stories this comes back to these stories, the stories we have about retirement, the stories we have about work and what work needs to look like to be meaningful and satisfying, and how we might reimagine work as something that brings purpose to our life, that is an investment of time that gives us so much more than just money, so that we can continue to have that in some way in our lives for longer, but we still have the flexibility for time with our grandkids, or to travel, or to play golf, or to spend time in the garden, but that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Part of my conversation with people is about in midlife, further to, I think, purpose. There's a further breakdown of purpose, right? When we're younger, there's this whole, my purpose is my destiny. What am I here for? This is a big thing, right? Plus what you talk about.
I have a dream and I want to be this.
Yeah, and I'm, my life is meaningful and all of that kind of thing, right? And there's also the acquisition trail that you talk about, all the things that we need to do to look like we've got a good and meaningful life. And then gets midlife and goes, shit, none of that really matters. What actually matters is the legacy I leave behind. That might be my family, so I want to invest more time in my kids and my grandkids. It might be doing work in the community. It might be being an even better leader, but now I'm focused on how I can grow people, not just hit my numbers. There is
don't just gloss over that.
Shift.
That's huge.
There's a real shift.
No one's going to remember your third quarter earnings into 2025, but they will remember the person who mentored them and helped them through that difficult situation and taught them how to lead and who taught them how to pull a team together. They remember those people, and it might not be a legacy as in it's up on a wall somewhere, but it's a legacy in the hearts of the people who you've touched. Like I remember in Specsavers land, I set global records and had lots and lots of stuff in the businesses that I ran that were really good. But the thing that I'm going to sit back in my rocking chair and sort of say that was great is that 13 people that started with me owned their own stores. So they went on to be leaders themselves. And that's a huge legacy. And you can get all the money in the bank and stuff, and that's all really cool. It's not nice to have. But the legacy of those 13 people who have all gone on to develop leadership capabilities that they might not have had they not worked with me, is huge. And that's the one that you'll sit back in your rocking chair when you're really old and say, yeah, we did good with that.
Yeah. I
The
mean,
records and
I
stuff
think,
will be forgotten. They'll be broken and someone else will get them.
well, I think it was Freud, I think it was Freud, who said there are two things in life, work and love. And that's what humans need. And when you think about it, we're like, we are animals. And so the work, all animals have work to do every day, and it's all about survival. So it's get the food I need and stay safe. So when you look at kids, right, little kids, particularly like kindergarteners, and their play is work. They have jobs to do, and they give each other jobs, and they organize themselves into little tasks. And whether it's making sandcastles or ferrying water around or organizing piles of freshly cut grass to make like the walls of a makeshift house outline or whatever it is,
They play at work.
their play is work. And we kind of have got the story that play, I don't know, I think there's so much to unpack here about the place of play and what play really means, and work and what work really means, and that we've separated the two and said that work is something you do and then you go play. And I'm like, well, hang on a second. Can't we bring, without having Lego games and all the rest of it, how can we be more playful in our work and see work as a joy and a play and purposeful in and of itself, no matter what job you're doing?
Well, you look at business hacks, and enjoyment is the best productivity hack there is. You can't get a better productivity hack than enjoying what you're doing. You'll work harder, you'll be more engaged, you'll go for longer if you're enjoying it. It's the greatest productivity hack we have. And so to be able to incorporate a bit more play to actually create some enjoyment at whatever we do has got to be helpful.
And with most of the exec teams and the senior leaders, and particularly the senior women I work with, there is sweet Fanny Adams in the way of play or joy in their lives and in their work. That's become just everything is so grinding and pressure filled and relentless. And there's so much competition for resources and time and attention in the workplace, and there's not enough time for any of it at home. And when they can start to release a little bit of that pressure and find some of the space and just the moments of lightness.
Is it that you have to be safe to be able to play at work? Is it that
I think it's huge.
Feel that I don't have the safety to be able to play at work, and how do we develop that? And I think the leaders have got to sort of lead the charge with that, and they've got to be a bit more fun and a bit more playful and not quite so serious.
And again, I think people then go, oh, it's forced fun and practical jokes and that kind of thing. And it's like, no, it's just bringing some lightness to tense moments. And so there are mindsets and capabilities, and there's also social contracting around it. Like, how do we do this thing? How do we have hard conversations and then make sure we don't walk away still enmeshed in a conflict that no longer exists? How do we diffuse things? So there are lots. I think this false dichotomy of work and play sets up for, I've got to get out of work because work's a grind. And we in midlife, we totally have the opportunity to reassess these things and to decide to play differently. And to say, if you're going to, one of my questions for people often in this time of life is, what's your number? And it's not how much do you need in the bank to retire. It's how old are you going to be when you die?
Right.
Seems like a weird question, right?
Pluck that out of the sky.
Yeah, but when I ask it, everyone's got a number.
Yeah, right.
So what's yours?
Oh, I'd probably be late 80s somewhere.
Yeah. So what I say to them is so tell me, so pick a number. We're going to play this. I know we're running out of time.
89, let's go with that.
89, right. Tell me what life's like at 88. Paint me a really detailed picture of all aspects of your life at 88. Best life at 88.
I'm going to try and emulate my mum and lead the charge in the retirement village. That'd be pretty good fun. She'd be, her and I. My wife's Irish, and she has an expression that you didn't lick it off a rock, as in, this isn't something that just happened to you. It's part of your genetics and it's part of who you are. And my mum and I are we share a lot of genes. So I
So tell
plan
me
on
what
being a
else.
bit
You'd
like
be
that.
leading the charge. You'd be leading the charge in a
Yeah, hopefully
community living
things.
environment.
Yeah, probably. Hopefully
What
things
else?
like my knees and stuff, and you're still mobile. That and sort of
Yep.
doing the work to make sure that your body stays in as good a nick as it can. That's
Still
got to
playing
help.
golf.
And I can see where this is going. You're going to say, why is it 95?
Yeah,
Why
no,
isn't it
yeah, tell
100?
me.
I can see where you're taking this.
But seriously, and I encourage listeners to do this, to think, what's my number? And then think a year younger than that, really write down in detail, journal down in lots of detail, what's your relationship like? What's your health like? What kind of adventures are you having? Tell me about a typical
Yeah.
morning. What are you planning to do at Christmas? You get into this, you really paint yourself a vivid picture of what life looks like at that age. And then it's like, well, why would you stop? So
Mm,
you want to die a year after that. Now you might, we never know when our number's going to be up, right?
no.
But the game, and it's a game, but the game is illustrative in that it says if life's like that at 88, then how much longer would you like to live?
Hmm.
And what would you say to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great way. It's a great way
Do
to
you want to
frame it.
answer it for me?
I can see it coming from a long way off too.
Yeah, I know.
But
And so
I think the hard thing and that idea that you'd give away, you know, you give away
7.5
everything
years,
that you have for in 25, 30 years time, you give away everything you have to be as fit and well and happy as you are now. And we're not
100%.
really appreciating that we're fit and well and happy. In a few years' time, these are going to be the good old days. The good old days that
Yeah.
I got to do podcasts with Kate Billing and go and talk from stage at conferences and doing all of that sort of stuff. They were the good old days. And there's going to be a time where you're not going to be able to do some of that, whether it's a physical thing or what. But it's trying to hang on to it for as long as you can is probably a cool thing, and have more fun and have more connections and have all of the
Yeah.
things that you're talking about. And I think if
Because
we
if
do
you,
that and get that time purpose balance right, to have the autonomy to
Mm.
do what you want, but then still be connecting with the people you love and still be making a difference and still be contributing and still have that awareness of what stories I'm making up that aren't serving me and how to change them. I'm a big thing on curiosity and to just stay curious the whole time. What can I keep learning? My wife has an uncle who's still lecturing. He's just turned 80. And he still lectures at Dundee University in Scotland. And every conversation with him, I just never want it to end because he's always curious. He's always got something to share. And he's just one of these people who I love being around. And I guess I don't know, you've made me think now, but I think I'd like to be a combination of him and my mum. That would be a pretty cool way to be.
And so the question then is not only, well, how much longer could you live and what could you do with that vitality, but what decisions do you need to make now? And how do you
Yeah.
have to start living life now that gives you the best chance of being that person at 88?
Yeah,
What
it's
decisions
cool.
about relationships, health, work, learning, you know, all of these things? What are the decisions now that build a platform over the next 30 years for you to be that version of you or better and
Yeah,
still going strong?
there's a great thought experiment that I do in the very last chapter of Curious Habits, which is talking about all of the habits that you do. And part of it is, what would you go back and thank half a lifetime of you ago? So what would I go and thank 26-year-old Luke for? And not what advice would you give? What would you thank them for doing? And that's a really cool experiment to do. But the other one is, what would 75-year-old you thank you for doing now? And it's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? That let's work out what 75-year-old me would thank me for, and let's start making sure we do
Let's
that.
make sure we're doing that now. My husband Paul and I are always having conversations about it, future us and past us, like
Hmm.
that we're grateful that past us did X, Y, and Z,
Yeah,
and
it's a
what
great
do we
thought
want?
experiment.
Yeah, what do we want future us to be having the same conversation about? Like, oh God, I'm so grateful that 56-year-old us did X.
Still went hiking and still caught up with friends and
Yeah,
still
it's like,
did fun
do
stuff.
the thing, man. It's, I guess, coming back to the kind of just the midlife reset thing, is like, it's really easy, I think, regardless of whether you of gender, etc., to withdraw, to retract. And I think that's actually a natural part of this time of life, is aside from any of the contextual pressures, etc., there can feel like there's this diminishing invisibility, contraction, life is getting smaller and harder thing going on. But I encourage people to look for the opportunities in that, the opportunities to retreat, to reflect, to consider, to take time out to think, to restock, if you like, in this time, because it does get better, it does get bigger, and it does get much brighter. On the other side of the middle bit, it gets really messy and hard in the middle, and then it gets better. So how can you use this time when it's feeling a bit shitty to actually do the work to think about future you and become that person now in small and consistent ways? Because that's what it takes.
It's a wonderful piece of advice. Kate Billing, it's always a pleasure to see your smiling face. And thank you for coming
So
on the Reset
grateful to be
podcast.
here. So grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. My favourite thing to talk about, life and being a human in it. So I always welcome the opportunity and great chats. Thank you, Luke.
Always good to see you. Thanks, Kate.